My name is Leon Harding. I'm 47, and for 20 years I was the quiet heartbeat inside Northline Media in Portland. If a file moved, a client got billed, a render farm woke up at 2:13 a.m., or a deliverable landed in a customer's S3 bucket wearing the right file name at the right minute. Somewhere in the invisible distance, a process with my fingerprints on it turned the gears. Across the conference table, Mason Gray tipped back in his chair until it creaked. He used to practice that look in glass doors, chin up, eyes soft, a little pity to suggest he was reluctantly doing hard things leaders must do. The packet he pushed at me might as well have been a napkin. "Nothing personal," he said, smiling like he was telling me the weather. "Just efficiency. The new platform handles what you used to handle. It doesn't need benefits or vacation." 2 weeks of severance for 20 years of nights, weekends, and ruined breakfasts. The number on the page was offensive mostly because it was tidy. Someone had multiplied the minimum by the minimum and called it mercy. I nodded. He blinked, confused that there was no bargaining speech, no red face, no sudden revelation about mutual respect. "Security will escort you out at 5, he added, like a waiter reminding me the kitchen closes soon. In my office, I put my life into a banker's box, a 4th-grade clay mug that reads, "Dad" in wobbling cobalt. A 3x5 photo of my daughter, grinning in a soccer jersey 2 sizes too big. A tiny cactus my ex bought when we still believed plants could teach us patience. The framed plaques stayed on the wall. They were words for visitors. The work was wires and scripts and stubbornness. At 4:30 I logged in one last time, mounted a private backup I kept encrypted and off the corporate asset list, and pulled down 3 directories: Docs, SRC, Maps. 2 decades of institutional memory compressed into something that disappeared into the inner pocket of my jacket. Then I logged out, wiped my chair with a stray napkin like a guest leaving a diner, and walked toward security at 4:59. I didn't glance at Mason's tinted window. I drove home with the radio off. The apartment felt smaller than it had in years, like the air had learned to make room for the noise I always brought back. I set the box on the counter, poured a neat whiskey, and sat with the backup drive under my palm as if it had a pulse. The consultants had promised Mason a future with less Leon in it. They'd forget that systems have memories too, and that this system's memory was a person. I joined Northline in 2005, when 15 of us lived above a used bookstore on Hawthorne. If a wall needed painting, we painted. If a client needed a feature, we wrote it. When the printer ate its own drum, I shook toner out of my hair and learned enough about laser printers to start an unhelpful second career. We moved twice, then into the building with real badge readers and conference rooms named after trees. We went public on a March morning so wet it felt ceremonial. I stayed because we built things that gave smaller studios a fighting chance. My daughter learned to read beside a rack of humming servers while I tailed logs. She colored while I wrote the first version of Northline Flow, a brittle set of cron jobs that slowly grew into an orchestration layer with a sense of humor. It apologized in logs, nagged misbehaving workers, and texted me polite, "Are you awake?" messages at ungodly hours. My marriage didn't survive that phase. "You love the job more than me," my ex said. It wasn't love, exactly. It was responsibility. An animal I fed because it kept other animals alive. 3 years ago, Mason arrived from sales to learn the plumbing. He shadowed me for 6 months, filled small spiral notebooks with diagrams, asked genuine questions, and bought the team donuts on Fridays. Then someone promoted him to operations director. Curiosity curdled into certainty. The notebooks vanished. The slide decks grew. He learned phrases that sounded decisive in boardrooms. Self-healing, hands-free, lights-out operations. With the promotion came consultants, the kind who arrive with a logo, 3 layers of project managers, and a rate card that makes CFOs sweat in a hopeful way. They promised an autonomous orchestration platform that would rationalize legacy workflows and reduce human bottlenecks. They mentioned me only to say I was single-point fragile. A month before the meeting that ended my ID badge, my permissions started shrinking. First a read-only toggle here, then an empty group membership there. New security policy, Mason said with a toothpaste grin. The same week a glossy PDF showed up. AOP, Final Architecture. I read the diagrams and tasted metal. They had my skeleton. Even the weird bones were mine. The ritualistic path names. The error codes that were actually song titles only I would enjoy. I checked metadata on a couple of core modules. They'd been zipped from our servers 3 months earlier, exactly when my access began to mysteriously refresh. They borrowed my house, painted the front door a new color, and sold it back to the owners for $2 million. Then they told the neighborhood I didn't belong there. I opened my private archive and stared at the unglamorous truth I'd kept for 20 years. Not just how things worked, but why they worked despite everything management refused to fund. A page labeled Debt listed security findings we'd triaged into oblivion, edge cases that required ugly scaffolding, bargaining chips I'd used to keep the lights on. The AOP perched on the same stilts. The consultants couldn't see the rot because they didn't know where to smell. Mason couldn't help them because he didn't know there was a smell. I wrote a simple Deadman timer on a Raspberry Pi at home. No fireworks, just a crone that pinged my phone every 72 hours for a manual. I'm fine. If I ever stopped clearing it, a script would email 3 executives a report titled Fragility, with a sober list of risks and where they lived. It was not revenge. It was my conscience asking future me not to stay silent, if silence would hurt people who had nothing to do with any of this. Then I waited. Day 1, fired. Day 2, quiet. Day 3, quieter. Day 4, at 7:12 a.m., my inbox turned into a siren. 7 messages, all urgent, all from Mason. Leon, hope you're well. We're seeing some instability in the platform. Could you make yourself available for a brief consult? We can discuss compensation. An hour later, queue is frozen, client deadline slipping. Please call. Then, this is critical. Respond immediately. By lunch, the CTO, the head of post, and the CEO were sending variants of "We value your historical knowledge." I answered only the CEO. I am no longer employed at Northline. The new platform should have its own documentation and support. I wish you success. Technically true. Also, the gentlest way to say you chose this. Day 5, a note from Claire in project management. Claire is the kind of person who keeps the building from burning down, while executives argue about the color of the fire extinguisher. You don't owe us. But 300 people here are just trying to keep their mortgages. Projects are failing. Help them, not him. I stared at the screen, at the tiny blinking cursor, waiting to measure what kind of person I wanted to be. Then I typed 3 conditions. Independent contractor, not employee. 500 hour, 40-hour minimum, payable net 7. Mason is excluded. No meetings, messages, drop-ins, or status pings. 1 violation and I walk. Claire replied in 90 seconds. Approved. When can you start? My badge emitted a sad red X at the turnstile. Security called upstairs and handed me a visitor lanyard that smelled like hand sanitizer. Claire walked me to a corner conference room where 8 engineers looked like they'd slept in the building. I knew 6 by name. They were good smart, decent, bleeding from trying to hold back a dam with spoons. Start from the top, I said. They did. Jobs launched and never completed. Workers that fork-bombed themselves under load. Render nodes that forgot their identities after patching. A queue with 1,000 items and 1,000 different wrong reasons for existing. Backups that restored into slightly different universes, where timestamps didn't line up, and file names were spelled with the wrong kind of dash. Show me documentation, I asked. They handed me a 30-page booklet with many arrows and few nouns. I had written 2,000 pages over 2 decades, not elegant, but deeply specific. This was a brochure. I spent the next 2 hours reading their YAML like tea leaves. The failure wasn't dramatic. It was exquisite. In pursuit of modern, The consultants had trimmed the weird little sub-processes that handled all the ugly realities half-uploaded files, corrupt EXR sequences, clients who thought FTP was a lifestyle. They optimized for throughput and forgot that durability is the only metric that matters at 3:06 a.m. They mistook simplicity for robustness, which is like confusing a paper airplane for a Cessna. "Can you fix it?" Claire asked. "Yes," I said, "but not by Friday. We need to rebuild the foundation the way it actually works, not the way a slide wants it to work." "How long?" 3 to 6 weeks for stability. Faster if you let me be boring." "How much?" 60 to 100,000, depending on what monsters crawl out of the ductwork. She nodded without blinking. "Be boring." I put a sign on a reclaimed office door. "Contractor. Do not disturb." I turned the glass wall into a whiteboard of rectangles and arrows, with rude little notes that said things like, "This lies," and "Kron is a cry for help." I rebuilt modules no one had known were modules, wrote adapters to translate consultant speak back into the dialect our machines understood. Added metrics with plain names: late, stuck, lying. I left slow code where slow was correct. I documented every decision in a repo I owned. They got read-only copies. I wasn't being petty. I was being the kind of careful you learn after giving too much away. Mason tried twice to drift in on a warm cloud of importance. The first time he hovered at the door. I pointed at the sign. He retreated. The second time he slid into a progress meeting, eyebrows knit with faux humility. I closed my laptop and folded my hands. Claire said, "Mason, this violates the terms." He argued something about visibility. I started packing my bag. Claire escorted him out. She came back and whispered, "He's terrified. His name is welded to this project." "Good," I said without heat. "I didn't hear that." She smiled. By the end of week 2, the system had a heartbeat again. Stuck jobs diminished to a handful of stubborns I could name like pets. Clients started receiving files with timestamps that didn't embarrass us. People went home before midnight. I sent an itemized invoice for 87,374 hours, 2 emergency on-sites, and 1 hardware fix no one had the courage to approve until something actually caught fire. Accounting approved it same day. The CEO phoned that afternoon with a tone I recognized from fundraisers and funerals. "Leon, you saved us. We want to talk about returning. Full-time. Title. Comp. Whatever you need." "It's not a money problem," I said. "It's a values problem. You believed PowerPoint over the person who built the house. That tells me what my loyalty is worth." "Mason made a mistake. We see that now." "Mason did what you empowered him to do. If I come back, one day a new Mason arrives with a shinier deck. What would change your mind?" "Nothing. I start elsewhere in 2 weeks." Half true. I had offers, and for once, leverage I wasn't afraid to use. 3 days later, I handed the team readable runbooks, held a real training where people were allowed to ask stupid questions, and locked my office door. Claire walked me to the elevator. "They'll fall apart without you," she said. "Maybe," I said. "That's not my problem anymore." 2 months into my new job at Tressthorn Medical, a place where the CTO once wrote code and remembers what 2 a.m. feels like, Tyler called from a number I still recognized. "They brought the consultants back," he said without saying hello. "Mason convinced the board the platform needs performance optimizations. We're back in the same ditch." "Did you follow the docs I left?" "We did. That's the thing. Whenever they try to optimize, the core rolls back to your last known good." "Then the anchors are working," I said. "When I rebuilt, I bound critical layers to signed credentials. You could change skins all day, but if you attempted surgery without the keys, the system quietly reverted to stable. It wasn't sabotage. It was a seatbelt installed by someone who had actually seen a crash." "Greg," Tyler stopped. "Mason is losing it. The CEO is demanding explanations. Half the team is interviewing." "Good," I said. "You deserve leaders who respect the craft." A week later, Claire sent a link with no commentary. Northline parts, ways with operations, director following systemic failures, the headline said, as if the failures were a set of weather events. The consultants lost their retainer. A new director was conducting a strategic review, which is corporate for how many mirrors do we have to smash before we admit it was us. I didn't toast. I didn't even feel vindicated. I felt something like a fever breaking. I'd spent years being the guy who could not step away, because stepping away meant shame if things failed. The shame wasn't mine to hold. On a Friday dusk that smelled like rain, my daughter slid into a booth across from me at a place with lights wrapped around beams. 19 now, second year of college, eyebrows that rise exactly like her mother's when she's teasing me. "You look different," she said, stealing a fry. "Different how?" "Like somebody took a backpack of bricks off your shoulders." "I learned a new math," I said. "Loyalty to people who don't value you isn't noble. It's just a slow illness. When Northline melted, I didn't save them. I saved the people who would have been laid off because someone else wanted a slide that said autonomous." "You're a better person than I'd be," she said. "Doubt it. I just finally understood revenge isn't hurting anyone. It's taking back what they convinced you wasn't yours. Your time, your judgment, the belief that your craft matters. Does it feel weird that your name isn't on the thing you built?" "It was never my name," I said. "It was my care. And my care is mobile now." We walked to the river after dinner. Portland's lights made a necklace out of the bridges. My phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown address that didn't need to sign itself. "Leon, I was wrong. Can we talk?" Delete. At Tresthorn, we shipped a quiet feature the following week that reduced a clinic's check-in time by 8 minutes per patient. 8 minutes multiplied by 1,000 people is a human day saved from waiting rooms. The team high-fived in a way that made me remember why 25-year-old me did any of this. Northline spent 3 times what they saved by eliminating me, then signed another contract to stabilize what never needed to be destabilized. Mason learned that reputations on the internet have half-lives measured in quarters. The consultants learned that invoices don't erase fingerprints. Claire landed a better job at a competitor, who asked her why she was leaving, and then listened to the answer. Tyler sent a text the day he accepted a new role. They treated the system like a toy. Thanks for treating it like a habitat. As for me, I stopped measuring my worth by how quickly I could sprint toward a fire someone else built. I started measuring it by how calmly I could design a place where fires didn't start, and how reliably I could go home even when the pager buzzed, because a team, not a hero, had the keys. Automation didn't replace me. Amnesia tried to. The cure wasn't another script. It was remembering who I am when the badge stops beeping. And that doesn't require benefits, or vacation either. But I take both now, because I can.